In this section, we're going to talk about antecedent manipulations and learn about establishing or motivating operations and how to use these to your advantage. So let's first talk about some antecedent manipulations. When we talk about antecedent manipulations, what we're really talking about is changing the environment in some way to promote good behavior and to decrease undesired behavior. Remember, antecedents occur before a behavior. By using antecedent manipulations, we can make it more likely that the patient wants to work, or make it more likely that they get the correct response, which lets them be successful, which in turn will eventually make them want to work more, right? Because they're getting good things from it. We can promote good behavior through antecedent manipulations. We can leave reminders. We can give SDs, such as prompts around the house, like, okay, time to clean your room, or don't forget your keys. Also, we won't go over it in this training yet, but there are things called social stories, where we can go through a story and illustrate exactly what behaviors we want the person to engage in. That's an antecedent manipulation. It's happening before the behavior. The point, though, is that in antecedent manipulations, we're altering the environment in some way to promote good behavior and to decrease undesired behavior. For example, if you want to stop eating sweets and eat more healthy, you'd put the cookies, either throw them away, hide them, and make fruit like apples and bananas more apparent in your kitchen. This way you're promoting the eating of fruit and demoting or decreasing eating the sweet or junk food. Here are a couple examples of antecedent manipulations: schedules and choice boards. And again, I want to say there's nothing magical about these. It just depends on how you're going to use them. You need to be consistent and predictable. So again, a choice board allows the person to know what to expect, allows them to know what's coming. This can promote behavior related to completing tasks and not escaping. They know what to expect. And remember, this is kind of a human thing. We, as humans, like to know what to expect. We like to know what our schedule is for a week, for example. This is the same thing we're doing for our patients. We're giving them something to know what to expect. But it's an antecedent manipulation. It's designed to promote good behavior before the behavior happens, and it's designed to alleviate or take care of some of the problem behavior but before it happens. So if we have a patient that we're working with who doesn't like, say, changes in routine, and they throw a fit every time you change their routine, providing a visual schedule will allow them to see what's up next or when the change is going to occur. So we're promoting that before the behavior happens, before the tantrum behavior for the change in routine. We can use within and extra stimulus prompts. So if you remember, like a within prompt is we're changing something about the stimulus itself. So here in QPY, we want the Y is the target response. We want the person to choose Y. So we made it bigger. Or we might change its color or something. An extra stimulus prompt is something in addition to the stimulus. Here we drew a square around it. We could draw a circle, point an arrow, something. Gesture our finger, point at it. This helps the person to be more successful. Again, this happens before the behavior of them choosing the letter. Because if they choose the right letter, right, they get a reinforcement. They get a consequence that's good, which will hopefully promote good behavior in the future, or will promote good behavior in the future. So again, a prompt, by prompting, we're using antecedent manipulations. We're making good behavior more likely, but this occurs before the behavior happens. Here's a few more antecedent manipulations I've done in the past, or you may be familiar with from your days in school. Doing odd or even number problems. So if I give a person, like say 20 math problems, it may be overwhelming, but if I say, okay, only do the odd ones or the even ones, it makes it a little more digestible. Likewise, covering up half a sheet. You only need to do these problems right now, we'll do the rest later. Utilizing a timer, so they know when to expect the task or whatever it is to be up, or when they can access something. Sorry, that was a little unclear. So utilizing a timer, so they kind of know like when they can expect a task to be over, or when they can access something. Or highlighting where they need to make the mark or fill in. Or, for example, sometimes you have to fill out forms for like taking your car into the shop or other things. Whoever's giving you a paper to fill out, they may highlight what you need to sign or put initials on. This helps you to know what behaviors to engage in. Likewise, we can do this for our patients. This next topic is it's called motivating operation. This is in the antecedent realm. It's before behaviors occur. This is a very important topic. It can be difficult to understand. It took me a little while in school to understand this. So certainly as an RBT, I don't fully expect you to know every single thing about a motivating operation. But I do want to get you familiar with it, because you'll be using it quite a bit. You also may see me through this training use MO or EO, motivating operation, establishing operation. For the purposes of this training, we're going to say they're the same thing. They're synonymous. What I want you to understand is that an MO, a motivating operation, alters the effectiveness or the value of a stimulus or activity. This in turn evokes, a fancy word for making it more likely, makes behaviors related to getting that stimulus more likely. Or it could also abolish it, makes it less likely. But that's getting too technical for this demonstration right here. The point I want you to know is that a motivating operation alters the effectiveness or value of a stimulus or activity. For example, if it's raining outside, this alters the value of an umbrella. It makes it more valuable if you're going outside. You are more likely to engage in behaviors of getting and opening your umbrella if the MO is in effect, the MO being it raining outside, than if it was not. Behaviors that are evoked or made to increase are based on what has worked for the individual in the past. If the EO, establishing operation or motivating operation, remember synonymous, same thing, is in place for a person to want the item, they will engage in behaviors that typically get them what they want, good or bad. So for example, when my wife sees a spider, she wants it gone. The EO is in effect. The spider creates this MO or EO. Sorry, I'll need to pick one, right? Let's pick MO. The MO is in effect. There's a spider. So that creates a motivating operation to gain access to me to kill it. She knows that screaming will get my attention right away because this behavior has paid off in the past. Thus, a person's learning history is entwined in the idea of motivating operations. So, how would you create a motivating operation to be on time or getting out of your house in the morning, to remember to finish your homework assignment after a long day at work, to create a situation to have a person to want to put their shoes on, or make it more likely the patient will sit down and do program with you? So, how would you create a motivating operation to be on time getting out of the house in the morning? Well, sometimes motivating operations are natural, right? Maybe your boss at work tells you, hey, you're going to get fired if you're late to work one more time. But what if that person, or that boss, always said that, and they never actually fired you. So maybe that wouldn't create a motivating operation, right? Based on the history. So in this example, let's say that we allow ourselves to get a favorite snack on the way if we get out by a certain time. If this creates enough of a motivating operation, this will make the behavior that you have done in the past to get out on time more likely, such as maybe getting up earlier, getting dressed faster, etc., etc. Whatever the behaviors are that allow you to get out on time. In this way, we can even use antecedent manipulations. So what are some antecedent manipulations that we can use to make getting out of the house more likely? Well, we can set our clothes out first. We could get our keys, make sure we know where they're at. We could wake up a little earlier. Again, we're going to use antecedent manipulations in conjunction with this idea. But first, we need to set up the motivating operation. Here, allowing ourselves to get a favorite snack. If that creates in us a more likelihood to engage in behaviors to get us out of the house on time, we would say that getting a snack creates an establishing or motivating operation. So I want to say that again. If we start to engage in the behaviors that get us out of the house on time in an increased fashion because we're allowing ourselves to get a favorite snack on the way, allowing ourselves to get a favorite snack is operating as a motivating operation. So how will we remember to finish your homework assignment after a long day at work? This is something I've done in my life. Well, we could let ourselves watch a favorite TV program or play a favorite video game if we finish. If this is motivating enough, you will engage in increased behaviors that have gotten assignments done in the past so that you can watch that favorite TV program or play that favorite video game. And again, we can do manipulations, antecedent manipulations. We can put materials on the table beforehand, highlight items beforehand, etc., etc. The point is if we start to engage in increased behaviors to get assignments done, because we're allowing ourselves access to a favorite TV or video game, we can say that that access to that TV or video game is a motivating operation for getting the assignment done. How would you, as an RBT, and this is more work-related now, create a situation to have a person want to put their shoes on? As an RBT, you're going to make going outside contingent on them putting their shoes on. So they can only go outside if they put their shoes on. This will work if going outside is a motivating operation. If it's motivating enough that they will engage in increased behaviors to get outside. So if we know that this person will engage in behaviors to go outside, having them put their shoes on first to go outside is going to be more likely, or they'll engage in behavior that allows them to get help, or at least trying to put their shoes on because of the payoff of going outside. The point is we're trying to increase behaviors to allow access to going outside. And if one of those behaviors, if through our learning history, is to put our shoes on, this will help us to teach this skill. So here's the one that we're going to go into detail with. How would you make it more likely that the patient will sit and want to do program with you? Well, you could have favorite items and give them special attention, such as being more funny or making silly voices while they're at the table. Only allowing only allowing access and engaging in those fun behaviors when they are at the table with you. If motivating enough, they will engage in increased behaviors to access these items. And if that means sitting appropriately with you, and that's through their learning history with you, they will engage in the sitting behavior. But let's first talk about what a learning history is when we go more in depth to this. Learning history refers to the person's history with a stimulus or with the instruction. So in this example, in the learning history, over time, the RBT provides access to favorite toys, gives special attention, plays with them, only when the person is compliant or performs requested actions. The RBT ignores undesired behavior. One reason I'm going so in depth to this is I want you to realize that as an RBT, every moment that you're with that patient is important because it's part of your learning history with them. And also to understand that behavior change, especially positive behavior change, can take a very long time. I mean, I don't want to say it's going to always take a long time. That would be disingenuous. But there are times when it does take a while to establish this routine. So again, in this example, if the learning history is that the RBT provides access to favorite toys, gives special attention, plays with them, only when that person is compliant, and the RBT is good at ignoring undesired behaviors. That's the learning history this person has with the RBT. And remember, that doesn't happen overnight. That takes a little while to establish. This is why consistency and predictability are so important. So, from the perspective of the learner, they don't have to be conscious of this, but from the perspective of the learner, they get reinforced for compliance, and there's no reinforcement for undesired behaviors. This contingency quote-unquote tells the learner, to get the fun good consequence, you must engage in compliance behaviors, approaching, sitting in the presence of the RBT, etc. So in effect, to get good things, the learner's patient engages in behaviors such as compliance behaviors, such as sitting and approaching, and not engaging in undesired behaviors. So again, it's not like the person is consciously telling themselves this, but from the perspective of the learner, they get reinforced for compliance behaviors, and they don't get reinforced for undesired behaviors. So, then the RBT brings a bunch of fun toys and favorite snacks to the table. They have made sure that the patient didn't have access to them. They asked the parent. Therefore, remember that patient is in what's called a deprivation state. So if you remember from earlier in this training where we talked about DISC with the deprivation state, where the person hasn't had access to it, so these things are more motivating. In a nutshell, if you just ate 10 slices of pizza, a piece of pizza would not be very reinforcing, right? You would be satiated. Likewise, if you really like pizza and you hadn't had pizza for a few weeks, you would be in a deprivation state. So the RBT brings a bunch of fun toys and has favorite snacks to the table. That's the current situation. So in this example, the patient sees the toys, snacks, and the RBT at the table. The RBT asks for the patient to sit down. If the motivating operation is in effect, this will do what? It will increase the likelihood of behaviors for that person to access the items. So here, in the past, compliance behaviors have allowed that person access to the items. Therefore, it is more likely they will engage in compliance behaviors such as sitting down. And I want to stress, this is learned over time. This is something that takes place throughout the learning history. That's why I want to stress, every moment that you're with that patient, you're adding to that learning history. So again, in this example, the patient saw the toys and the snacks and the RBT at the table. The RBT asked for the patient to sit down. Because the motivating operation was in effect, the learner, the patient, engaged in increased behaviors to get access to those toys, which based on their learning history was compliance behaviors. So let's talk about the difference between the SD and the MO. A motivating operation sets the stage for reinforcement. It makes behaviors more likely to happen when the right conditions exist. The SD is the stimulus that signals that reinforcement is available. So, if an MO is in place, it will make responses to the SD more likely. So, for example, let's say we're walking around this summer, and darn, we forgot our water bottle on the couch. It's early in the morning and some places are not open yet. It's very hot and you start to get thirsty. The heat is creating a motivating operation. You will now engage in increased behaviors that in the past have gotten you a drink. And this is based again on your learning history. So what behaviors? Well, you need to find an open store. So you start engaging in increased behaviors, which includes scanning the windows of the businesses that may sell drinks. You see an open sign. The open sign is an SD. It signals that reinforcement, so here a drink, is available. You then walk into the store to get a drink. This is more behavior that results in getting you a drink. So would that person have walked into the store if it was 50 degrees outside, or if they had remembered their water bottle? Most likely not. Why? Because the motivating operation was not in effect. Likewise, in our earlier example, if the RBT didn't have toys or fun stuff, the person may not have been compliant because the motivating operation was not in effect. It is your job as an RBT, over time, to create these motivating operations and to use them to your advantage, or at the very least, understand and utilize them. And this is done through that learning history, through that being consistent, where they get reinforcement for the good stuff, the good behaviors, and you ignore the poor behaviors. So learning history and repertoire. This is very important. A person will engage in the behaviors that will most likely get them what they want, based on past consequences, remember? Remember, for something to be reinforcement or punishment, it has to affect the future likelihood of behavior. Therefore, a person will engage in behaviors that will most likely get them what they want, or get them out of what they, get them out of something, to escape something, based on what's happened in the past. So if a person, based on past consequences, get what they want when they cry and yell, they are much more likely to cry and yell if an EO is in place, They are more likely to cry and yell if a motivating operation is in effect, where they want to gain access for something. So again, I want you to understand that. So if a person, based on past contingencies, past consequences, gets exactly what they want when they cry and yell, so that's the behavior, that's how they communicate what they want, or to get what they want. They're going to engage in those behaviors if they see something that they really want. They're way more likely to. So when they go to a store and they see that favorite toy on the shelf, the motivating operation is in effect. And they're going to cry and yell. Why? Because the MO is in effect. This is why it is so important to teach individuals the appropriate behaviors and to build up their learning history and to build up their learning repertoire with appropriate behaviors, so that when the establishing operations are in effect, or motivating operations are in effect, they will engage in those appropriate behaviors. As an RBT, you're not expected to know every little thing about motivating operations, but you're expected to use them to your advantage. You want to ask yourself, why would this person want to listen to me? Why would this person want to approach me? These are important considerations when working with our patients. I want you to think about the following. When a baby is developing, milestones are met with lots of excitement. People clap, jump, use funny voices, etc. when those milestones are met. And when I say a milestone, what I mean is stuff like walking, or their first sound, or the first time they smile, the first time they reach for you, all sorts of these different things. These milestones, as a baby develops, when they're met, people get very excited. This encourages the baby to continue to do these. In ABA, we say we're reinforcing that behavior. So the first time a baby might smile, we're probably going to smile back and get very excited. This in turn will likely make that baby want to smile more. Remember, we're talking about development. These developmental skills will start to build upon each other. Soon, the baby will learn joint attention, being able to attend to the same something in the environment the same that the other person is. They're basically looking at the same thing. Or they might point to an airplane in the sky or point to a car driving by. This encourages future development in social behavior. The point is, though, is that when a baby is developing, when they do things, especially meeting milestones, they're met with lots of excitement. One of the deficits that is common to autism is a preoccupation with normally irrelevant or non-noticeable stimuli in the environment. When the patient attends to the stimuli, this can prevent them from attending to relevant stimuli related to learning, social interactions, and other people. So when I say something is normally irrelevant or non-noticeable, what I mean is small little things that aren't supposed to be the main attention focus for a person. For example, a dust particle floating around in the air, a tree outside barely swaying, a string hanging down from the windows that is moving back and forth. Another deficit in autism is social deficits. Wanting to interact with people or knowing how to interact with people. So if the child is attending to all this stuff in the environment that is normally irrelevant or non-noticeable, this prevents them from attending to the more relevant stimuli, such as another person or favorite toy. In lay speak, you might say they're distracted. But I think that oversimplifies it a little bit. To the person with autism, these stimuli, attending to them, make sense to them. I can't answer you why it does, but it's part of the deficits of autism, where they have a deficit in social skills and an excess, or they do too much of, attending to stuff that's not normally relevant or stuff that's not noticeable. Another consideration that you're going to want to have is that most of the kids or most of the patients you're going to be working with have not developed what's called quote-unquote intrinsic motivation. Now I say quote-unquote because if we really want to get philosophical about this, a behavior analyst may not say there's such a thing as intrinsic motivation. But I'm using it here just to describe basically self-motivating. We have to ask ourselves, why would the person want to pay attention to me? Why would the person want to pick the correct card? To them, to the patient, learning or picking the right card may not be something that's relevant to them. If you ask most typically developing 4-year-olds to show you what they know, they're going to be excited to show you. They like their responses. People saying, "Oh, you're so smart. That's awesome that you know that." To some of our patients, that may not be motivating enough. This is why we use reinforcers that are more tangible, while also pairing with social reinforcers such as "good job," so that eventually we can just use the social reinforcers. That's a very broad and general way to put it. But the point I want you to understand as an RBT is to ask yourself, why would the patient want to pay attention to me? Why would they want to get or pick the correct answer? So, by acting silly, or by being funny, or doing something different, we're going to provide a way to make yourself more noticeable. Again, quote-unquote silly is not a behavioral term. It is just something I'm using right now to illustrate. You're going to have to be something, you're going to have to make yourself more noticeable. This training I originally did as something called a silliness training. Because remember, we're working mostly with kids. They're a child with autism. They're a child first. And kids love when we act funny. They love having fun. Now, as an RBT, you have lots of competition. iPads, iPhones, movies, toys, video games, food, that irrelevant stimuli or small stimuli, the stimuli that they are tending to, such as the floating dust particle. That's your competition for not only their attention, but how they like to have fun. So, the definition for acting silly, or again, acting more noticeable, for the purposes of our discussion here, is acting in a way that promotes the child or the patient to attend to you in a positive way, while still being able to provide clinically sound therapy. Silliness is simply a label of behavior. It is part of an enriched environment for the person, for the patient. You'll be providing a lot of attention to all of their good behaviors. So I want you to think, what makes something silly? What makes something noticeable? Because really what we're talking about here is making yourself as a stimulus more noticeable. Because remember, you are a stimulus within the environment. Our ultimate goal is to provide our clients, our patients, with clinically sound, empirically validated methods of therapy that are going to provide them with the maximum benefit. So why is this important? Well, let's talk about the definition of contingency from the ABA book. Definition of contingency is a complete description of the behavior, its consequence, and what situations it will influence the future of behavior. But remember, it's mostly like a contract. If you do this, you will get this. Think about the contingencies operating when you work with a child or a patient. The ideal situation is that the contingency operating within the environment will affect that patient's behavior in a desired way. The most important component of the learning environment is you, the RBT. You are the one providing the enriched environment, the desired consequences, and are establishing the antecedent situations that make behavior more likely, and bad behavior or undesired behavior less likely. Your goal as an RBT is to become the SD for increased responding from the child. In other words, you want to be reinforcing to that child. When the child interacts with you, are they motivated to respond? If they are, there's likely to be fewer behavior issues and more success. In this way, acting silly or more noticeable is an within stimulus prompt for paying attention to you. You're making yourself more noticeable. You're changing something about yourself. You're making yourself more noticeable. So if you look at this picture, it's from an old children's book called Where's Waldo? In it, you're supposed to find a character wearing a red and white striped shirt that's wearing glasses. If you imagine the world of an individual with autism, there's a lot of other stuff to pay attention to. So we want to make stuff more noticeable. By having a prompt, such as acting funny or acting silly, or acting a little bit different, we make ourselves more noticeable. If we can see on the picture, it's much easier to find Waldo when there's some sort of prompt there to show where he's at. This, in essence, is why we need to act silly or act in a way that will get the client's attention or patient's attention. You're competing with a lot of other things. Acting in this way, or making yourself more noticeable, is both an antecedent and consequent strategy. Remember, an antecedent comes before the behavior and a consequence after. It is an antecedent strategy because you are making yourself more noticeable. It's kind of like a within stimulus prompt. Consequence. It's a consequence strategy because we're going to give exaggerated responses for when the appropriate behavior does occur. Kind of like you already do in reinforcement. Actually, exactly like you do in reinforcement. So why is this so important? Well, being reinforcing to the patient affords us more time to do program. Less time will have to be spent to get the patient's attention, and more learning opportunities will be available. Remember, we're trying to teach our patients as much as we can in the time that we have them. We want to take as many opportunities as we can, and it's better to use that time to teach them rather than trying to get their attention. So, what are some of the ways to become reinforcing so that the patient will respond to you? Well, the first thing is we pair ourselves with reinforcing items. We bring favorite toys. We have access to their favorite food and give it to them when they need it or want it during program. Basically, we make ourselves known to be paired with reinforcing items. Sometimes this means we might bring some toys from home. Basically, we want that individual, the patient, to think, hey, when that person's here, I get good things. Being consistent. The child knowing what to expect, the patient knowing what to expect. Getting to know the patient through rapport building and other ideas. make sure to read the protocol about how to work with that patient. If you are new to the patient, ask around to get some tips. And remember, each patient is going to be different, so how to act to get their attention is going to depend on the patient. But definitely one way is to pair yourself with those reinforcing items, whatever that is for the person. And being consistent. Remember, when a patient touches their iPad or their tablet, something happens. It's predictable. We need to strive to be like that. Yes, over time, we may become a little less predictable, but right now we're building rapport and we're trying to make ourselves more noticeable. So we want to be as consistent as possible, and we want to pair ourselves with reinforcing items. We want to make this a lifestyle for the entire time that we're with the patient. Don't stop trying to be fun or reinforcing between learning opportunities. Always keep in mind reinforcement principles and contingencies. Listen, I know that it can be odd to act in this way around other adults or at a parent's home, but try to find a method that works best for you. I like to use silly voices or draw or sometimes sing funny songs. But basically you need to find what's going to work for you. The more you practice it, the more natural it'll become for you. Remember generalization. Once a child has a handle on previously mastered target items, work on it in a variety of fun and silly ways. For example, you might use a cup to make a hat for a character, pretending like you forgot your name and asking the child what it is. You can have scavenger hunts. Hey, go find me the cup. Go find me the toy. Go find me the Skittles, whatever it is. The point is that we're going to try to be as fun as possible. Practice role-playing. Some children have favorite characters in TV shows. Take time to know them and maybe the theme song. Look for video clips of the characters. Try to act it out. One thing I've had to do recently is learn all about Minecraft. A lot of the patients I work with really love Minecraft, so I've taken time to learn all the different characters and kind of the stories behind it. If you find that you're spending a lot of time trying to get that person's attention, take a few minutes and find the right kind of behavior that will get them to attend to you. Once you figure it out, keep it up. Remember that taking time to do this saves time in the long run. Building a rapport, building a good therapeutic rapport, means that you won't have to spend as much time getting that child's attention. The pace for learning will be quicker. Of course, in reality, it's not that easy, and each patient is going to be different. Some, I'd say most patients, aren't going to respond right away. If you're new to a case, ask others, and if you're a veteran in the case, think of some new ways to approach the therapy if the person's attention seems to be waning. It may have to be a drastic change. Remember, we don't want to keep up with the status quo if the data isn't showing progress. The important thing to keep in mind is that you want your behavior to help the individual patient to respond to your instructions and to attend to you. Finding the right way to be silly or more noticeable will not only be beneficial for the patient, it will make the session a lot more fun for you. Also, if you find something that works for you, if you find some form of way to get attention for that patient, remember to share it with other people on the team. And a very important caveat though, and something that makes this very difficult to do and master, is that it happens to have to happen in conjunction with all the protocols, data collection, and other factors of therapy. In no way should being silly or fun or more noticeable interfere with the clinical goals and protocols of the patient. If the protocol indicates that the individual should not use TV as a reinforcer, then don't do it. I am working with a patient right now who absolutely loves Minecraft, but the parent has asked me not to pretend to play Minecraft or not to pretend to be the characters because it gets the individual child too riled up. So yes, it should never supersede the protocols. And remember, while it is important for the child to quote-unquote like you, it is as equally important for you to provide strong therapy according to the plan. So don't let the individual patient get away with things they shouldn't. I think that's worth repeating. Listen, I understand you want the child to like you, you want them to be your friend, but you also have to remember that we are there to provide intervention therapy, meaning that you have to follow through with the protocols. I would practice with any kids you have in your life, your own kids, nieces, nephews, friends' kids, if you can. While it can certainly be awkward and quite a bit draining, being able to act in ways that make you more noticeable and more silly is something that will make you a more effective RBT. Basically, it just makes you more noticeable. It can lead to more attention from the child or patient and allows you to provide more therapy.